Anything you can imagine, and anything you've seen on Star Trek, we already have, and it's not at Area 51, it's out there in the desert with the Lockheed Skunk Works. If they were hostile, we would have been totally obliterated by now because of what we've been doing. And as soon as we detonated the first atomic weapons. Whatever you think humans have in these deep black programs, these illegal black programs, it's more and it's worse. It's literally killing people, literally, and the planet. This is why we have to have disclosure like yesterday. I want to emphasize that there are two governments dealing with this. There's the constitutional government. Most of the people in that government have no idea what's going on. And I can say that with authority because I'm one of the only people you'll ever meet who has briefed people at that level of government since 1993, when I briefed the incoming President Clinton's CI director. Then, the other part of it is in Congress, or most people in Congress, they know nothing about the subject, even if they're on key oversight committees. So this has been something that was a shock to me. It's going to be a shock to you. It's going to be a shock to the world and the American public to find out that the constitutional government in the United States since the late 1950s have been basically pushed aside and relegated to irrelevance, frankly, on this issue since the late Eisenhower years. And so this whole history we will unpack over a series of these episodes because it's very important to understand the context of how we got from there to here. But importantly, right now, the crisis of the moment is that there are a number of people coming forward from various black sites, which are highly classified, illegally run operations in intelligence, military, and corporate programs. And those guys that I've been meeting with for about almost 2 years now, 20 months, have decided to come forward publicly, identify themselves, and in a controlled release begin to give the information to the American people and the U.S. government. So this is a very complex program. It's now coming to a sort of a crescendo, and this is why I think we need to be talking with each other every week or so.
So let's go to the first question, which is going to be about human technology. What is the real capacity of human technology?
Right. Well, here, the biggest part of this story isn't the extraterrestrial part of it, ironically. That's secondary. And in fact, people who have been in these covert programs that are very disinformation oriented have wanted the public to believe we're not alone, but that there's a threat from outer space. And most of you who are familiar with my work know what Wernher von Braun, through his spokesperson for the last 5 years of his life, 𝗿𝗏 said when he was dying, and in 1974 said the whole purpose of these covert programs, one of the big overarching purposes, is to be able to hoax a attack or an alien threat and present the extraterrestrial presence as a threat so that they could consolidate military power, industrial power, and also pivot the population through fear into realizing there's another enemy to fight. Now, when you're doing that, it's a long-term psychological warfare operation, a psyop. And the best way to do that is once they figured out and reverse engineered the extraterrestrial vehicles, the NHI craft, as they're calling them now, non-human intelligence craft. Those then began to be deployed in the late 1950s into operational craft that look like a UFO. For most people in the lay public, they're indistinguishable from a vehicle. And those have been used in deceptive operations known as false flag operations. And these include everything that's in the pop culture on the subject, human abductions by aliens, mutilations of cattle and humans, and all kinds of skullduggery. Now, we can prove, if you go to our archive, that this has been a CIA psyop for many, many decades. And If you look at the Lost Century and some of the other documentaries we've done, we put that evidence in there. I'm not going to unpack all that right now. But the big story has always been the technology, because without the technology, they couldn't hoax the threat, which is completely false. Anybody with any understanding of this, and even members of Congress are saying this now, like Congressman 𝗬𝗱𝗏 and others, that if they were hostile, we would have been totally obliterated by now because of what we've been doing. And as soon as we detonated the first atomic weapons. So the real issue becomes, if they were hostile, what are we still doing? You know, and why are we still here targeting them and knocking them out of the sky? And we'll get into this in a moment. It's because they're not hostile. They're here to help us and understand us, but they're waiting for us, humans, to grow up to a level of evolution where we can live peacefully on the planet, become a planet using advanced technology, i.e. not fossil fuels or solar or what have you, but very advanced technologies in physics, and then join them out in space eventually in an interplanetary society over the long haul, over hundreds and thousands of years. That's their objective. Now, the objective of covert programs has been to attack these objects, seize them, study how they work, what's called reverse engineering, where you take something and you take it apart, and you study it and study it and study it to figure out how it works, and then rebuild it to the best of your ability. Those reverse engineering programs started in the 1940s, and they hit really major pay dirt, let's say, results in October of 1954 when they mastered gravity control. We have that information from the top scientists at the Naval Research Labs, the biggest Department of Defense labs in the world, who saw that document in, quote, the vault some years ago in the 1990s and informed us about that. So I think most of the problems we're going to run into with disclosure is that neither the president nor the Congress nor the general public and media understand what the technologies are that have been figured out already that can be used in deceptive and, you know, malicious ways. So I think this is why we have to have this conversation now, because those systems, not only have they already been used to create the specter of a danger from outer space, and never mind Hollywood and the media, everything ufological being very terrifying to the general public. But I think that with this coming out, there's a big risk that they will start hitting buttons to make more and more false flag operations happen. And the only way they can get away with that is by the populace and our leaders being tricked. And the only way you can prevent people from being tricked is having the knowledge, the facts of what we actually have. So that's what I want to talk about for just a moment. Now imagine this, just put this in your paradigm. The week that the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, the fabled director of that, 𝗬𝗀𝗃 was passing away, he told a member of our team and a friend of mine, James Goodall, a very well-known aerospace historian, that we had figured all this out. This is now 1995, so this is 30 years ago. And he says, anything you can imagine, and anything you've seen on Star Trek, we already have, and it's not at Area 51, it's out there in the desert with the Lockheed Skunk Works. Now, I've been at that facility, and I've been there in the last 15 months. So what he was saying was that we have figured this out, but folks who have, let's say, an overarching desire to control the population through fear, through endless war, through control of the energy sector, this is key, they don't want the full truth out, they want part of the truth out. And they want the part that redounds to their benefit, that serves their agenda. This is why in 1999, I wrote a paper, you can see on our website, drstephen.greer.com, that states that this is the disclosure that serves secrecy. And the disclosure of this subject that serves the secret agenda, which is what that means, is a disclosure that would present a threat and where they could hoax a threat, and then that causes the world to unite sort of around a dystopic totalitarian military response, like the movie Independence Day. Go look at that. That's right out of CIA scripting, against the ETs. So now, how could they do that? They couldn't pull that off if they hadn't figured out how these objects work. I will tell you that from 1995 to now, the man-made craft, they're called ATs, advanced technology, or ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles. They're used interchangeably. The euphemism used actually in the aerospace industry is just AT, an advanced technology, which of course is vague deliberately. And those craft at this point are, to even very trained eyes, virtually indistinguishable from an extraterrestrial vehicle or craft. So though that creates a big problem, because if we do not get those powerful interests under some kind of safe and peaceful control of those technologies, then those can be unleashed to stage, hoax, all kinds of problems on a number of fronts. So whatever you think, remember this, in context of the recent drone events, all kinds of events that have been happening, whatever you think humans have in these deep black programs, these illegal black programs, it's more and it's worse. Now, the good news, now let's talk about the other side of that coin. The good news is that this a controlled and safe release of that information and technology, which is the objective of this group of defectors and whistleblowers coming out in the next couple of days, is that we could transform the world economy and civilization to where we reach what's called a level 1 civilization that Michikaku talked about, where we're no longer damaging the environment. Within 20 years, there's no poverty on the planet. There's this big leap forward for all of humanity, not just the United States, but the United States would obviously lead that because we're the largest military and economic power on the planet. And it would also clean the environment. Visualize, if you will, like during COVID, when no one was going anywhere. And there were mountains in urban areas in the distance that you couldn't see for decades, and they were crystal clear because nobody was driving and there was no industrial output. But imagine full advanced technological civilization, but you have this wonderful technology that's pulling energy out of the fabric of the space around an object, what's called the quantum vacuum or 0-point energy field. And that technology is safely deployed to run the planet, to run your house, to run your car, to run African villages, to run villages in the rainforest in the Amazon so they don't have to cut down the forest to make charcoal to cook their food. This would be, within 20 years, the biggest advancement in human history, in known recorded human history. Way more. There's nothing that comes close. But that's why it's also secret. In other words, what I've been told by people in the national security apparatus who've been on the side of keeping this secret, and I've had many meetings like that, is that it's too good. And what that means is it's disruptive. You know, the internet was disruptive. Horse and buggies, were eliminated by cars and engines. Typewriters were replaced by keyboards and computer systems. There will be winners and there will be losers. But the real winner is all of humanity and the earth herself, because we'll have a sustainable civilization within our, well, I'm no spring chicken, but perhaps even within my lifetime, where it won't even resemble the way the world is today. So it's a very forward-looking, positive event happening. But there are also these landmines out there. In other words, very powerful interests who don't want to have us go into that future could start disrupting that future. And this is why, in a moment, we'll talk about what else needs to be done by the president, the Congress, and the heads of states of other countries. And that's going to be a key part of what we'll be discussing over the coming weeks, months, and years on this podcast.
Dr. Greer, you've talked about this transnational organization that controls this. Can you explain this to the audience and talk about the urgency to neutralize the capabilities of this organization? Because I think too many people think it's the government covering it up, and they don't have a clear idea of who is actually behind the cover.
Yeah, this is a great question, Michael. And one of the thing that tilted my life's axis was December 13th, 1993, when I had a prolonged meeting with the director of the CIA for Bill Clinton, R. James Woolsey, a meeting he subsequently denied happening because, well, my commentary on that is you don't want to hear it. But, it's Washington, and it's lawyers and politicians and what have you. And everybody knows what that means. So, but as a consequence of that personally, what I realized is that the constitutional government of we the people, its president, most of its elected officials, except for a few devils that are in there who are on the payroll of this covert group, really know nothing about the subject. In fact, I would say that all of you who've seen the documentary Unacknowledged knows more than most of the members of Congress and most people in the White House on this subject. And that is a tragedy, and it's dangerous. So the organization that deals with this is not just U.S. It is actually a transnational criminal organization that's highly covert. And that is a fact. Not a conspiracy theory, it's a fact and proven in any court of law. And I want to remind people, one of our early Disclosure Project witnesses who appeared at the National Press Club in 2001, almost 24 years ago, right before 9/11, is a man named Carl Wolf, who is since deceased. But he, in 1968, was at Langley Air Force Base at a national security agency compartmented operation, where they were analyzing the early digital images coming back from the moon from the lunar orbiter that went around the moon to map it before we landed a year later in ’69. And he was called in to repair some equipment in this compartmented operation. He walks in, and you look at his testimony. It's up on our archive, our website, dpiarchive.com. And he says it was like a United Nations. There was people from all over the world in there, China, other countries that you'd say, oh, those are our enemies. No, they were in a compartmented operation dealing with this. That was 1968. That was, how many years is that now? A long time. So, going on 60 years, 57 years ago almost. And so when you think about that, extrapolate that data point from that whistleblower, and I've heard this from many others. And what you have to realize is that the organization running this is not only U.S. It's dispersed around the world and is embedded. It's a bit like a metastatic cancer. It's gone through the whole body politic of the world, and have enough technologies and power and money and influence to maintain a corrupt enterprise. So this is why no president or Congress has been able to get this under control up till now. And the good news is that there are a number of people in those operations who want to come out. They want to defect. But it's by no means over. And this is why another part of what we've been doing, and I mean, this is in this, well, it's a big tome, but this is the new briefing document for the incoming administration in Congress. And it's the biggest one I've done. I've done them since Clinton in the 90s. But in it, there are a series of executive orders and for the president and recommendations to the Congress. And also there are versions of this for other heads of state elsewhere that we're briefing. And in it, it very clearly recommends that there needs to be a law enforcement operation stood up that gets these programs, at least the most malignant ones of them, on a leash and gets them under control, because the technologies that they have are so advanced that when they are used maliciously, and they have been already in many ways, that we'll go into maybe another time, that it's a threat to national security, but also global security. And this is something that can't continue, because the technology arc from the 40s to now, it was gradual, and then it went like this. And it continues to go nonlinear, exponential. And this is not things that you're going to see, you know, at MIT and Harvard. These are in covert programs, engineering and science programs that are deeply secretive. And those technologies, when they're used for good, could be of extraordinary value. As a medical doctor, I know of ones that would be incredibly valuable for healing and for emergencies and for fixing very chronic problems as well as acute traumatic issues. But at the same time, those technologies have applications that would save the biosphere and eliminate poverty and pollution. But that same technology can be used as a weapon, right? So all technology is a double-edged sword. And what it is who is wielding it? Who is controlling how it's used? Who is determining? What is the consciousness and the motivations of the people who wield that technology, who have it? And that gets into almost an existential question, isn't it? Spiritually, not necessarily religiously, but what is the consciousness of the people who have that technology? Are they hell-bent on destruction and endless war? Or do they want a world of peace and of universal peace on earth and in the heavens? Remember, all interstellar civilizations have to be transdimensional, because you can't stay solid matter and going through faster than the speed of light. They are by definition transdimensional. So they're traversing these dimensions. They have that ability. So they can literally manifest objects, and their manufacturing, like I mentioned earlier, is using this level of these other dimensions and energy and bringing it into full 3D materialization. Now, that's a science, though. I mean, you're talking about creating a sort of resonant frequency technologically. It's very subtle. That's in the form of, say, an architectural, the whole schematic, so very holographically. And then it goes from that state in the near astral, the gap I described, into boom, it's solid right here. That's why we see the light from these objects. It's not like light here, because all the minerals and elements and the whole structure are of such purity that even in the vacuum of space, we could not manufacture that. So I have a new top secret person coming forward that's been analyzing part of a craft that crashed in 46, 47 in Brazil. And interestingly, that metallurgy, you know, he was talking to me about, and I started describing, he says, yes, that's exactly how it has to be done. Because he was doing all the research for it, for some folks that are shadowy, but I'm getting all those files and handing them over. Yeah. Oh, yes. He's cooperating, the cooperating witness. They might as well cooperate, or whether we hit them with a subpoena. You want to play nice? Not nice. Let's be nice. Okay, so that's really cool. Now, then you get into this thing of bilocation, trilocation, what have you. You've heard of this, where an enlightened master will be one place and then be seen another place, and the people have seen them physically. Now, how is that? Well, this is like the same thing with the spooky effect, but where it's not a quick movement. It's you keep that standing wave here and here, and you replicate it. Why? Because we're thinking linearly. In reality, that point in space and this point in space, you can have it appear simultaneously, but you can do 3 or 4 or 5. Right? Now, you can do that innately in the meditative state when you begin to practice cities and they start unfolding if you need to. I tell people that if you get into a higher state of consciousness, every city you need will be available to you when it's urgent. So you don't have to waste a lot of time unless it's something you need to learn to do, like being able to see, remote view, and communicate with the ETs. The whole CE5 contact protocol is, in fact, a very advanced city. Just look at it that way. That we've sort of made into a system that millions of people are now doing. Now, this gets into this question of, Are some of these craft the same craft over and over again? Yes. I'll tell you really, I like illustrating these abstract ideas with an example. So there was an actor and singer who was on my executive committee back in the 90s named 𝗿𝗏𝗰𝗄. He had been on, with Elizabeth Taylor movies and singer and really nice guy. And I would go to he had moved out of the LA, Santa Barbara and Montecito up to 𝗬𝗏𝗃𝗃, Washington. So I'd be at his house and sitting with him, and, we got to know each other really well, and wonderful, sweet man, but he wasn't in good health by the time I met him, but his wife, Dorothy, was amazing. And so, I was at their home and was teaching them all this, and teaching Dorothy and their grandchild to go out and do 𝗖𝗍 but on the ocean. And they were doing it, and craft would appear on the cloud and disappear. I'm also the guy because he was so close to Marilyn Monroe, and he wanted to know how Marilyn Monroe died. So I gave her the document where it's a transcript the day before they found her dead, that, they wet worked her and killed her, but she was going to hold a press conference to tell the world about what Jack Kennedy told her during Pillow Talk about the ET issue. So I have that document. It's top secret, has not been declassified, and I published it. It's in my book. Nobody's read it. Anyway. I'm fascinated by humans this way. Okay, but so you put everything tied up in a bow on a silver platter and they go, huh? I know. I'm a tough professor. Anyway, that led to her beginning to do this on their own. So I go back, I get this call, and you have to remember was it 94, the Northridge earthquake in LA? Okay, so she's up in 𝗬𝗏𝗃𝗃, Washington. She comes downstairs very early in the morning, and there's an ET craft, blue, circular, outside over her driveway, and where there's a courtyard, and this blue light coming into her, connecting to her, and it's ETs. And she's going, oh my God. And they say, do not be afraid. We're always with you. You will be protected. She is told intuitively, I forget her name. It was her best friend who lived in LA. She picks up the phone, calls her, and the woman goes, Dorothy, you wouldn't believe what's going on. There's a blue craft outside with a beam coming in saying, do not be afraid. We are always with you. You will be protected during this earth change thing, right? An earthquake. And I'm going, well, there's a lesson in that. If you go forward in the future and the earth begins to have instability, everybody doing 𝗖𝗍𝗃, there's a reason why I need millions of people knowing how to do it. The future of the planet counts on it. But she asked me, was that the same ship in two places? I said, absolutely. It was the same craft at the same instant, just like the spooky effect, but in two places. So that's really cool. All right. So that's another manifestation of all this. And then you have the stories of people who can remotely heal through prayer, meditative, different abilities and consciousness. What's beautiful is that the medical technology of the ETs, it's using these trans-dimensional fields to heal and do amazingly beautiful events at our trainings. We don't have time to go into it, but there is a young woman, the most wonderful, brilliant, sweet, spiritual person who since age 17 has had metastatic bone cancer and is now 24, and it's going everywhere. And so she came to the training a few days ago up in Oracle, and we asked the ETs to come in, and I looked over by her and I saw this little guy, but not 3D, but sort of like a holographic, subtle energy. And I said, well, there's an ET right by you. She went into a state with one of our other team members assisting, where she was taken on a craft in her spirit body, and they did all this work and were clearing the cancer and her neck was completely frozen. She couldn't move it because the cancer had gotten into all the bones of the vertebra, and it was just all grown in there. She got back from this experience, I guess it was a half hour or something, and she's moving her. I've been she's totally fine with that. And so they're trying to work on her. So we had that just happen a few days ago. Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Oh, go back. I just got emotional. I love this girl. So, you know, think about this. Now, I was in a underground facility on the border of Mexico and El Paso years ago. And very funny story how that happened. I was being invited by a group of scientists working on some of these kind of technologies to come see what they had. And they were medical. I'm a doctor. And so I go there, I'm going through Houston airport, and there was this guy following me around with a beard and all this, and he kept following me, went to the bathroom. I said, what kind of perv, what are you doing? And I, you know, okay. And finally he comes up to me and he says, Dr. Greer, I'm Billy F. Gibbons. I said, well, I'm sorry, I don't know who that is. He said, 𝗖𝗍 𝗃. He was the lead guy for 𝗖𝗍 𝗃. She's got those legs, you know, that whole thing. And with the beard and all this. I said, oh, cool. He says, I have a seat in first class for you on this flight to El Paso if you'll let me go into this skiff, this place. And I said, how do you know about this? She says, well, I'm friends with those scientists. And like, they really are into my music and da-da-da. I said, oh, well, cool. I said, well, if it's okay with them, it's okay with me. We're going into their turf, not mine. So we had this great conversation. We go in there and they have these technologies where someone with a spinal cord severed, they can put a resonant field around it, transdimensional, regrow it. You have a missing limb, they can attach to the, you just have phantom pain. The astral body, that subtle, is still there. And they could connect to it and regrow the limb. No, this is for real. And I'm going, oh my God, and the stuff I have to do in the emergency department with people with brains coming out of their noses. But, you know, it's kind of like Star Trek where you put something over something. And so, you know, those are extant on the planet now, but they're classified. Why? The physics behind how those operate lead to everything else. And then you end oil and coal and the petrodollar and all public utilities, and half the Fortune 500 companies' capitalization goes to zero. All right? It's tragic. You know, this power thing locked into the 1800s paradigm is literally killing people, literally, and the planet. This is why we have to have disclosure like yesterday, okay? So, putting that in your mind for a moment, now let's consider what are the consequences of that. Before I go to this next slide, if you're a civilization that is advancing through these levels of consciousness, and remember, it happens pretty quickly. Once you're no longer scrubbing around, you know, we're still fighting in the Middle East. Though, you know, I lived in Israel 3 years. In the what? There's nothing there. People are killing each other, blowing each other up. What's there? It's nothing. It's like out here in the desert. There's nothing there. Murdering each other like you can't see over ideology, religion, this square piece of earth here, this ideology there. But once we get that sorted out, and you bring out the technologies in a state of peace where you can have no poverty and disease, what will people turn their attention to? Well, there'll be certain people who just play more video games and watch kitty cats on YouTube play the piano. But a critical mass of people, large number, will then be turning to the development of consciousness and creative pursuits. Because the work week will go down 10 to 15 hours, everyone will have abundance, then what do? So this whole creative aspect will kick in. No one's going to be racing around trying to be the big monkey to get more money from here and here, because who cares? You have what you need. So at that point, a civilization advances very quickly because they're freed up from the animal aspect of trying to grab stuff, and the whole consciousness shifts to abundance. You have what you need. So then, now what? You're alive, you're in a 3D form with the body, and so you begin to really explore and have the time to explore consciousness, the cities, spiritual states, beautiful technologies, and all of those applied peacefully, because you become a level 1 civilization.
If you like this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.